Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about quantum computers and its implication on the current state of cybersecurity. As Richard Feynman, one of the greatest physicists of 20th century, once put it, things on a very small scale behave like nothing you have any direct experience about, or like anything that you have ever seen. Now, quantum computers come from a branch of physics called quantum theory that deals with the world of atoms and the smaller subatomic particles inside them. You might think atoms behave the same way as everything in the world, in their own tiny little way, but that's not true. On the atomic scale, the rules change and the classical laws of physics we take for granted in our everyday world no longer hold automatically apply. How do computers work now? Let's talk about the traditional computers. You probably think of a computer as a neat little gadget, like shown in the image here, that sits on your lap and lets you send emails, shop online, chat with your friends, or play games. But it's much more and much less than that. It's more because it's a completely general purpose machine. You can make it do virtually anything you like. It's less because inside it's little more than an extremely basic calculator following a pre-arranged set of instructions called a program. Conventional computers have two tricks that they do really well. They can store numbers in memory and they can process stored numbers with simple mathematical operations. They can do more complex operations by stringing together the simple operations into a series called algorithm. Both of the computer's key tricks, storage and processing, are accomplished using switches called transistors, which are like microscopic versions of the switches we have on our wall for turning on and off the lights. A transistor can either be on or off, just as the light can be either lit or unlit. If it's on, we use a transistor to store a number 1. If it's off, it stores a number 0. Long strings of ones and zeros can be used to store any number, letter, or symbol using a code based on binary. Now, we have the key features of an ordinary computer: bits, registers, logic gates, algorithms, and so on have analogous features in a quantum computer. Instead of bits, a quantum computer has quantum bits or qubits, which work in a particularly intriguing way. Where a bit can store either a 0 or a 1, a qubit can store a 0, a 1, both 0 and 1, or an infinite number of values in between and be in multiple states at the same time. If that sounds confusing, think back to the light being a particle and a wave at the same time, Schrodinger's cat being alive and dead, or a car being a bicycle and a bus. A gentler way to think of the numbers qubits store is through physics concept of superposition, where two waves add to make a third one that contains both of the original. If you blow on something like a flute, the pipe fills up with a standing wave, a wave made up of fundamental frequency and a lot of overtones and harmonics. The wave inside the pipe contains all these waves simultaneously. They are added together to make a combined wave that includes them all. Qubits use superposition to represent multiple states simultaneously in a similar way. Just as a quantum computer can store multiple numbers at once, so it can process them simultaneously, instead of working in serial, it can work in parallel. Only when you try to find out what state it's actually in at any given moment does it collapse into one of the possible states, and that gives you the answer to your problem. Estimates suggest a quantum computer's ability in parallel would make it millions of times faster than any conventional computer, if only we could build it. 3 decades after they were first proposed, quantum computers remain largely theoretical. Even so, there's been some encouraging progress towards realizing a quantum machine. There were two impressive breakthroughs in the year 2000, first by Isaac Chuang, now an MIT professor, but then working at IBM's Almaden Research Center, used 5 fluorine atoms to make a crude 5-qubit quantum computer. The same year, the researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory figured out how to make a 7-qubit machine using a drop of liquid. 5 years later, the researchers at the University of Innsbruck added an extra qubit and produced the first quantum computer that could manipulate a qubit, that is 8 qubits. By 2011, a pioneering Canadian company called D-Wave Systems announced that it had produced a 128 qubit machine. 3 years later, Google announced that it was hiring a team of academics, including University of California at Santa Barbara physicist John Martinez, to develop its own quantum computers based on D-Wave's approach. In March 2015, the Google's team announced they were a step closer to quantum computation, having developed a new way for qubits to detect and protect against errors. In 2016, MIT's Isaac Chuang and scientists from University of Innsbruck unveiled a 5-qubit ion trap quantum computer that could calculate the factors of 15. One day, a scaled-up version of this machine might evolve into the long-promised, fully-fledged encryption buster. There's no doubt that these are hugely important advances. Even so, it's very early days for the whole field, and more researchers agree that we are unlikely to see a practical quantum computer appearing for many years, perhaps even decades. Impact on security. So we will discuss how quantum computers are going to affect information security by using its massive potential computing power. Well, we can say the biggest advantage of quantum computers, which is its massive computing power, is also the biggest threat for data security. The threat quantum computers pose on encryption is imminent. The swift progress being made towards quantum computing that threatens traditional encryption. The moment quantum computers succeed in cracking today's most prevalent encryption techniques like public and private keys, security breaches won't be isolated incidents that only affect a few million people or vulnerabilities that result in minor chunk in security's armor. Anyone who's interested in information security will know that RSA and ECC are the most widely used techniques to ensure security in internet in the wireless technology. Quantum computers pose a danger to how cryptography secures information on either side of a communication, whether that's in a messenger app or a financial transaction or a flight plan or an intelligence directive. Traditional mathematics based cryptography, known as public key cryptography, secures data using a set of public and private keys, a set of numbers used to facilitate communications. A public key is built with the expectation that it may be widely distributed, but private keys are engineered to be specific to a user. Private keys are calculated mathematically and parameters selected specifically so that calculating the private key from the public key is unfeasible. There are so many possible results for calculating a private key that it is currently impractical for outside parties to attempt to solve the calculation. If technology's path of innovation continues at its current pace, quantum computers will soon render today's cryptography completely vulnerable. Should we worry? I would answer that with a yes and a no. Yes, because quantum computers could solve some of the extremely difficult problems in today's world, like traveling salesman problem, which is NP hard, quite easily, which means the strongest encryption algorithms in today's world, like RSA and AES, will crumble. And no, because several mathematical techniques have been proposed for constructing quantum safe crypto systems, including hash functions, error correcting codes, lattices, multivariate equations, super singular elliptic curve isogenies, to name a few. We are not going to go much into detail on these algorithms here. Another threat you need to be especially concerned is if you have invested in bitcoins. As explained in a review by MIT Technology Review, the security protocols used by bitcoins use algorithms to turn data into mathematical functions. Every transaction is recorded into blocks using these functions as a part of the computationally demanding work of cryptocurrency mining. These cryptographic protocols make cracking a blockchain using today's computers practically impossible, but the system does have weak points quantum computers could exploit. For cracking today's cryptographic keys, part of Bitcoin's security protocol involves every Bitcoin owner possessing two encryption keys, a private one and a public one. The latter can be easily generated using the former, but the reverse is far more difficult. An owner's signature is verified without revealing the private key using a technique called elliptic curve signature scheme. While conventional computers don't possess the necessary computational power to derive a private key from a public key, quantum computers could do it rather easily. The elliptic curve signature scheme used by Bitcoin could be completely broken by a quantum computer. According to MIT Technology Review, Bitcoin doesn't have any plan to revise its current security protocols just yet. But with usable quantum computers still a decade or two away, cryptocurrency platforms have time to reconsider their encryption methods. What we have to remember here is that it's easy to romanticize quantum computing, and while the technology is closer than you think, it's not magic. It's not the end of encryption as many propose. That's it for today. Well, if you can, share your ideas and give us your feedback. Contact details are given in the description below the video. Thank you until next time.